It doesn't start with excitement. It starts with a stillness that feels intentional, like the day itself slowed down for a reason you can't fully explain yet. You might have woken up with a strange awareness, not anxiety, not anticipation, just a quiet sense that today isn't ordinary. Not heavier. Just different. That feeling didn't come from nowhere. Today matters because a choice was already made. Not impulsively. Not dramatically. Thoughtfully. Carefully. With a level of intention that took time to form. What was chosen wasn't about impressing you or proving anything. It came from observation. From listening. From noticing the details you never thought anyone paid attention to. That's what makes it special. This wasn't selected out of obligation or expectation. It came from a moment of clarity where someone realized that caring quietly wasn't enough anymore. That sometimes, love needs a physical anchor. Something tangible. Something grounded. Something that says, I saw you, even when you weren't asking to be seen. For a long time, emotion stayed unspoken because it felt safer that way. There were reasons. History. Timing. Fear of disrupting something fragile. But today exists because that inner hesitation finally lost its grip. Not in a reckless way, but in a resolved one. Resolution doesn't shout. It settles. What was chosen carries meaning not because of its value, but because of its timing. Today isn't random. It aligns with an internal shift that's been building quietly for weeks, maybe longer. There was a moment recently where something clicked. A realization that waiting longer wouldn't make things clearer. It would only make them quieter. And quiet isn't always peace. Sometimes quiet is avoidance disguised as patience. That difference became impossible to ignore. So instead of continuing to think about what to say, or how to say it, or when the right moment would arrive, a decision was made to act in a way that felt true. Not loud. Not performative. True. Truth feels steady. The choice wasn't rushed, but it also wasn't delayed anymore. It came from an understanding that connection doesn't deepen through perfection. It deepens through presence. Through effort that isn't announced. Through gestures that don't ask for recognition. That's why today matters. You might not even know what's been set in motion yet. You might sense something approaching without being able to name it. That's because this wasn't done to create suspense. It was done to create alignment. Alignment between intention and action. Before now, those two things weren't fully in sync. The intention was always there. The action waited. Not because of lack of care, but because of fear of misstep. Fear of choosing the wrong moment. Fear of giving something meaning too soon. But meaning has a way of showing up whether you invite it or not. It showed up anyway. It showed up in small realizations. In moments of comparison where nothing else quite measured up. In the way thoughts circled back to you even when attention was elsewhere. In the awareness that what was felt didn't fade with time, it clarified. Clarity doesn't demand urgency. It demands honesty. Honesty is what led to this choice. This wasn't about making a statement. It was about acknowledging a truth that already existed. That what's been shared, even quietly, carries weight. That ignoring it would be a kind of dishonesty, not just to you, but to themselves. That internal honesty is new. Not because feelings are new, but because courage has caught up with them. Courage doesn't always look bold. Sometimes it looks calm. Sometimes it looks like finally trusting your own emotional compass instead of questioning it. That trust is present now. What was chosen reflects that trust. It reflects an understanding of who you are, not who you try to be. It's connected to something you once mentioned casually, or something you value deeply but rarely say out loud. It's tied to your energy, not an idea of you. That level of attention doesn't happen accidentally. It comes from care that's been paying attention all along. You may not realize how often you've been thought of. Not in an obsessive way. In a grounded, respectful way. In moments where something reminded them of you unexpectedly. In choices that were influenced quietly by your presence, even when you weren't physically there. Those moments accumulated. They led here. Today isn't about revelation. It's about recognition. Recognition that what's been felt deserves to be honored in some form. Not explained. Not defended. Just honored. Honor doesn't need permission. It needs sincerity. This gesture carries sincerity because it wasn't driven by expectation of response. It wasn't chosen to secure anything in return. It exists because holding it back no longer felt aligned. Alignment is powerful. When actions align with feelings, there's relief. A release of tension that's been sitting beneath the surface. That relief is being felt now, even before anything is exchanged. That's how you know it's right. You might feel an emotional softness today. Not overwhelming emotion, but openness. A willingness to receive instead of question. That openness isn't coincidence. It's your intuition responding to something already in motion. Intuition recognizes sincerity. It doesn't need details. There's a reason this wasn't delayed further. There was a risk in waiting too long. Not the risk of rejection, but the risk of missing the moment when it would still feel honest. Honest moments don't last forever. They ask to be met. Today is being met. Whatever form this takes, it's not meant to complicate your life. It's meant to ground something that's been floating. To give shape to an emotional truth without demanding definition or outcome. Outcome isn't the focus. Presence is. You don't need to analyze what this means for the future. You don't need to measure its significance immediately. Its purpose isn't to push you forward. It's to meet you where you are. Meeting someone where they are is an act of respect. That respect has always been present, even when words weren't. Now it's tangible. There's something important about the fact that this choice was made quietly. No build-up. No announcement. Just a calm decision to stop holding back. Holding back was never about you. It was about self-doubt. That doubt has softened. What replaced it is self-assurance. Not arrogance. Assurance. The kind that says, I know why I'm doing this, and that's enough. Enough doesn't mean complete. It means grounded. You may feel drawn to pause today. To reflect. To be more present than usual. That pull is intentional. It's giving you space to receive something without distraction. Receiving can be uncomfortable when you're used to uncertainty. Uncertainty trained you to question everything. To look for hidden meanings. To brace for disappointment. But this moment isn't asking you to brace. It's asking you to be open. Open doesn't mean vulnerable without boundaries. It means receptive without fear. Fear doesn't belong here. This choice wasn't made out of pressure or desperation. It was made from a place of emotional stability. From a place that understands that giving doesn't weaken you when it's done freely. That understanding is part of the shift. The shift is subtle, but it's real. Something internal has crossed a threshold. From consideration to action. From hesitation to trust. From holding back to showing up. Showing up doesn't require grand gestures. It requires intention. Intention is woven into this day. Even if nothing is said out loud yet, something has already been expressed through the act of choosing. Choosing to acknowledge. Choosing to honor. Choosing to step forward in a way that feels true. Truth doesn't rush. It arrives. And today, it has arrived quietly, carrying something meaningful with it. You don't need to respond immediately. You don't need to define anything. You don't need to understand every layer of what this means. You only need to notice how it makes you feel. If it brings calm instead of confusion, that's your answer. If it feels grounding instead of overwhelming, that's your signal. Today matters not because it changes everything in an instant, but because it aligns something that's been waiting to align. Alignment creates momentum without force. That's the energy of today. Steady. Intentional. Real. Whatever comes next will build on that foundation. And that's why what was chosen matters. Not because of what it promises, but because of what it already represents. It doesn't unfold with urgency. It unfolds with a sense of quiet continuation, like something that began earlier is now finding its next natural step. There's no sudden shift in energy today, no dramatic turn. Instead, there's a feeling of movement that feels earned, as if whatever was set in motion before is now gently advancing on its own. What's important here is that nothing feels forced. That's new. Before, every emotional movement felt like it had to be measured, questioned, justified. Even good moments came with hesitation, as if enjoying them too freely might break something delicate. That caution shaped everything. It slowed things down, sometimes to a frustrating degree, but it also preserved what mattered. Now preservation isn't the priority. Expression is. Expression doesn't mean confession or grand declarations. It means allowing what's already present to show itself more clearly. It means no longer hiding behind restraint when restraint no longer serves a purpose. That internal permission is what defines this phase. The choice made earlier wasn't meant to stand alone. It was meant to open a door. Not a door you have to walk through immediately, but one that allows light in. That light changes how the space feels, even before anyone moves. You might sense that shift as a subtle ease. A reduction in emotional tension. A sense that you're no longer being kept at a distance, even if nothing explicit has been said yet. Distance used to feel necessary. Necessary for protection. Necessary for control. necessary for maintaining balance when things felt uncertain. But distance also creates silence. And silence, over time, stops feeling neutral. It starts to feel like absence, even when care is still there. That realization settled in slowly, not as panic, but as understanding. Understanding that closeness doesn't automatically mean loss of control. It means trust. Trust has been the missing piece. Not trust in outcomes, but trust in intention. Trust that what's being offered is genuine. Trust that showing care won't be misinterpreted or mishandled. Trust that vulnerability won't be punished. That trust is forming now. It didn't arrive all at once. It grew through observation. Through consistency. Through noticing that attention remained steady even when nothing was being asked for. Consistency speaks quietly. It doesn't demand reassurance. It just shows up. Showing up has happened in ways you might not have noticed at first. In remembered details. In timing that aligned unexpectedly. In choices influenced by you without your involvement. Those moments added up. They created a foundation strong enough to support movement. Movement doesn't always look like action. Sometimes it looks like emotional availability. Availability is present now in a way it wasn't before. There's more openness, more willingness to engage without retreating into safety behaviors. Safety behaviors once felt necessary, but now they feel limiting. Limitation creates frustration. Frustration doesn't come from lack of care. It comes from blocked expression. Expression wants space. This phase is about making space without overwhelming it. About letting things breathe instead of containing them. You might notice that communication feels lighter. Not more frequent necessarily, but less guarded. Less filtered. Less concerned with saying the perfect thing. Perfection has lost its grip. That's significant. Perfectionism often disguises fear. Fear of getting it wrong. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of revealing too much. Those fears haven't vanished, but they've been put in perspective. Perspective changes how fear behaves. Instead of stopping movement, fear now simply slows it enough to keep things thoughtful. That balance is healthy. Healthy doesn't mean boring. It means sustainable. This connection has moved past the stage where intensity alone defines it. Intensity without grounding burns out quickly. What's developing now is depth with stability. Stability allows emotions to settle into something lasting. You may feel more emotionally grounded than before. Less reactive. Less inclined to read into every pause or phrase. That grounding comes from self-awareness as much as from the connection itself. You've learned yourself through this process. You've learned how you respond to uncertainty. What triggers overthinking? What soothes you? What you're willing to wait for and what you're not. That knowledge empowers you. Empowerment changes dynamics. It shifts you from waiting to participating. From wondering to noticing. From hoping to recognizing. Recognition feels different from hope. Hope looks forward. Recognition looks at what already exists. What exists now is a mutual awareness that something meaningful is present and deserves to be handled with care. Care is guiding actions now. Care in pacing. Care in expression. Care in timing. Timing is being respected rather than rushed. There's a reason things are unfolding gradually. Gradual doesn't mean uncertain. It means intentional. Intentional actions carry weight. Weight that doesn't need to be announced. This isn't about creating a moment that demands a response. It's about creating an environment where responses can arise naturally. Natural responses are honest. Honesty is what gives this phase its strength. There's no need to impress. No need to perform. No need to escalate for the sake of momentum. Momentum is already there. It's quiet, but it's steady. You might notice that your thoughts feel less cluttered. That you're not replaying scenarios as often. That your emotional energy feels more available for the present moment instead of being consumed by anticipation. Anticipation used to be exhausting. It kept you slightly ahead of yourself, never fully here. Now you're here. Presence is grounding. Presence allows you to feel without immediately labeling or judging the feeling. It allows space for enjoyment without fear of consequence. Enjoyment is becoming easier. Not because everything is resolved, but because you're no longer resisting what feels good out of caution. Caution once served a purpose. That purpose has been fulfilled. Now caution is being replaced by discernment. Discernment isn't about pulling away. It's about moving with awareness. Awareness is guiding you now. You're more attuned to subtle shifts. To energy changes. To the difference between genuine interest and obligation. What's being offered here doesn't feel obligatory. It feels chosen. Chosen energy feels warm. It doesn't pressure. It invites. Invitation is powerful. It allows agency. It respects boundaries. It acknowledges autonomy. Autonomy has been honored throughout this process. That's why this feels safe. Safety doesn't mean predictability. It means trust in handling unpredictability. That trust is mutual now. Mutual trust changes everything. It removes the sense of imbalance. The feeling that one person is more invested or more vulnerable than the other. Even if expressions differ, the respect remains equal. Equality brings calm. Calm allows truth to surface without distortion. Truth doesn't need urgency. It needs space. Space has been created. That space is what allows whatever comes next to be genuine rather than reactive. You don't need to prepare yourself for anything dramatic. There's no impending emotional storm. There's no sudden demand for decisions. This phase is about settling into what's already been set in motion. Settling doesn't mean stagnating. It means grounding before growth. Growth built on grounding lasts. You might find yourself less concerned with labels and more interested in how things feel moment to moment. That shift indicates emotional maturity. Maturity values experience over explanation. Explanation can come later. Experience is happening now. This is where trust deepens. Not through words, but through consistency. Through presence. Through the quiet follow-through of intention. Follow-through matters more than promises. Promises can be imagined. Follow-through is real. You're seeing real now. Not perfect. Not complete. But honest. Honesty feels different from intensity. It feels calmer. More stable. More sustainable. This part of the story isn't asking you to do anything differently. It's asking you to notice what has changed without forcing it to mean something immediately. Meaning will reveal itself. It always does. For now, what matters is recognizing that the energy between you has shifted from hesitation to intention. From holding back to showing up. From confusion to quiet clarity. Quiet clarity doesn't announce itself. It settles into your nervous system. You feel it as ease. As steadiness. As a sense that you don't need to chase or retreat. You're exactly where you need to be. This moment isn't about arrival. It's about alignment. Alignment between what's felt and what's done. That alignment is rare. It's worth honoring. And it's still unfolding, gently, without demand, exactly as it should. It doesn't announce itself as a new chapter. It feels more like realizing you've already crossed a line without noticing the exact moment your feet touched the other side. There's no jolt, no emotional spike. Just a quiet awareness that the ground beneath you feels different now. More solid. More honest. What's unfolding here isn't about surprise. It's about recognition. Recognition that something meaningful has been building steadily, even when neither of you knew what to call it. Recognition that the effort, the patience, the restraint weren't signs of confusion alone, but signs of care that didn't want to rush its own truth. That realization changes how everything else feels. Before, there was always a sense of waiting. Waiting for clarity. Waiting for certainty. Waiting for the moment when things would finally make sense. That waiting shaped your emotional posture. It kept you alert, guarded, slightly tense even during good moments. Now, waiting has softened. Not because answers have been handed to you, but because you've stopped expecting clarity to arrive as a single moment. You understand now that clarity can arrive as a series of small alignments. Subtle shifts. Quiet confirmations that don't need dramatic language to be real. Those confirmations are happening. You might notice them in how interactions feel less effortful. How you're no longer rehearsing responses in your head. How you don't feel the same urge to hold back out of fear of misreading the situation. Misreading used to feel dangerous. It made you cautious. It made you second-guess your instincts. It made you question whether what you felt was shared or imagined. Now your instincts feel steadier. Not louder. Just clearer. That clarity comes from observing behavior over time. From noticing consistency rather than chasing reassurance. From seeing how presence has remained, even when nothing was demanded. Presence doesn't lie. It reveals itself quietly, in follow-through, in attention that doesn't fluctuate based on convenience or mood. That kind of presence has been there, even when things felt undefined. You see it now. Seeing it changes how you trust yourself. Self-trust is the foundation of this phase. Without self-trust, clarity feels threatening. With self-trust, clarity feels grounding. You're no longer afraid that understanding the truth will destabilize you. You know you can handle it, whatever it is. That confidence didn't come easily. It came from sitting with uncertainty longer than you wanted to. From learning to regulate your emotions instead of reacting to them. From realizing that not every unanswered question is a problem that needs immediate resolution. That learning matters. It's the reason this phase feels calm instead of chaotic. Calm doesn't mean indifference. It means emotional security. It means you're no longer outsourcing your sense of stability to external signs or timelines. You're grounded now. Grounded enough to enjoy moments as they are, without needing them to prove anything. Grounded enough to allow connection to unfold naturally, without pushing it toward definition prematurely. Definition used to feel like the goal. Now it feels like a byproduct. A byproduct of honesty. Of consistency. Of mutual respect for process. Process has been honored here. There were moments when it would have been easier to force clarity. To demand answers. To push for direction. But something deeper knew that forcing it would distort it. Distortion creates regret. Patience creates understanding. Understanding is what you're stepping into now. You might feel less preoccupied with what comes next. Less focused on outcomes. More present with what's happening right now. That presence is powerful. It allows you to notice nuances you might have missed before. The way tone carries intention. The way timing reflects consideration. The way actions align with words, or don't. Alignment is clearer now. Where there's alignment, there's trust. Trust doesn't require constant reassurance. It doesn't need constant checking. It rests in observation and experience. Experience has shown you something important. That what exists here isn't fragile. It hasn't collapsed under uncertainty. It hasn't faded with time. It's adapted, grown, matured. Maturity feels different from intensity. Intensity burns hot and fast. Maturity warms steadily. This connection has moved into a warmer space. Less dramatic. More sustaining. Sustaining connections don't rely on emotional highs to feel real. They feel real in their steadiness. Steadiness allows vulnerability to feel safer. Vulnerability used to feel risky. It felt like exposure without guarantees. Now it feels like alignment with your truth. Alignment doesn't demand perfection. It invites authenticity. Authenticity is present now. You don't feel the same need to perform or impress. You don't feel like you have to present a version of yourself that's carefully curated. There's more ease in simply being. Being is enough. That realization shifts the dynamic significantly. When you stop trying to control how you're perceived, you start connecting more honestly. Honest connection deepens naturally. Depth doesn't come from intensity alone. It comes from trust built over time. Time has done its work here. Even the moments that felt stagnant contributed to this readiness. They taught patience. They taught self-awareness. They taught discernment. Discernment is guiding you now. You're better at recognizing what feels aligned and what doesn't. Better at noticing when something resonates deeply versus when it merely distracts. That discernment creates clarity without forcing it. You may notice that your emotional reactions are less extreme. Less swinging between hope and doubt. That emotional regulation isn't suppression. It's balance. Balance allows space. Space allows honesty. Honesty is what will shape whatever comes next. Not pressure. Not urgency. Not expectation. Honesty. Honesty about feelings. About boundaries. About readiness. Readiness looks different for everyone. What matters is that readiness is present now in a way it wasn't before. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just present. Presence is the theme here. Being present with yourself. With the connection. With the moment. When you're present, you stop trying to jump ahead. You stop trying to rewrite the past. You simply engage with what's real. What's real now feels less confusing. Not because every question has been answered, but because the questions no longer feel threatening. They feel manageable. Manageable questions don't paralyze you. They invite exploration. Exploration doesn't require certainty. It requires curiosity. Curiosity is replacing fear. Fear once asked, "What if this goes wrong?" Curiosity asks, "What if this grows?" That shift changes everything. It changes how you approach conversations. How you interpret silence. How you respond to uncertainty. Uncertainty no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like part of the process. Process doesn't rush. It unfolds. This unfolding feels intentional. Not planned, but guided by awareness. Awareness of timing. Awareness of capacity. Awareness of emotional readiness. Those factors are aligned now. You don't need to push anything forward. You don't need to pull anything closer. You're not behind. You're not late. You're exactly where this story needs you to be. That realization brings peace. Peace doesn't dull connection. It strengthens it. Strong connections don't rely on drama. They rely on trust. Trust is what's being reinforced now. Not through words, but through experience. Through consistency. Through the absence of panic. Absence of panic is telling. It means you feel safe enough to stay present without needing to control the outcome. Control used to feel necessary. Now it feels unnecessary. Letting go of control doesn't mean letting go of boundaries. It means trusting that boundaries can coexist with openness. They can. This part of the story is where that balance is being practiced. Practiced gently. Without pressure. You might find yourself more reflective. More grounded. Less reactive. That's not detachment. It's integration. Integration of everything you've learned so far. Integration allows you to carry the connection with clarity instead of confusion. Clarity doesn't mean certainty. It means understanding what feels true. What feels true now is that whatever this is, it's being handled with care. Care is evident. Care in pacing. Care in attention. Care in restraint when restraint is needed, and expression when expression is right. That care creates trust. Trust creates depth. Depth creates meaning. Meaning doesn't need to be declared. It's felt. You feel it now in the way this connection sits within you. Calm. Steady. Honest. Not demanding. Not distant. Just present. This phase isn't asking you to decide anything. It's asking you to notice. Notice how far you've come. Notice how different this feels from before. Notice how confusion no longer dominates the narrative. The narrative has shifted. It's no longer about what's missing. It's about what's here. And what's here feels real. That's enough for now. Everything else will unfold in its own time, built on this foundation of presence, trust, and quiet clarity. This isn't the end. It's the part where the story finally feels like it's standing on solid ground. It doesn't feel like momentum in the way people usually describe it. There's no rush forward, no sudden acceleration. Instead, it feels like something settling into place after a long period of adjustment, like furniture finally arranged in a room you've been living in half-furnished for too long. You don't notice the change immediately, but once you do, you can't imagine how it felt before. What's happening now isn't loud. It's steady. Before this, so much energy was spent trying to interpret. Interpreting pauses. Interpreting tone. Interpreting what was said and, more importantly, what wasn't. That mental effort became familiar, almost routine. You didn't question it because it felt necessary. Necessary to stay aware. Necessary to stay prepared. Necessary to protect yourself from disappointment. That vigilance shaped everything. Now, that vigilance is loosening. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you no longer feel the need to guard every feeling. There's a growing sense that what exists here doesn't need to be monitored so closely. That it can be trusted to exist without constant supervision. Trust feels different than hope. Hope leans forward. Trust rests. You're resting now in a way you weren't before. This phase carries a sense of emotional grounding that's subtle but unmistakable. You might notice it in small ways. You're less preoccupied with timing. Less fixated on outcomes. Less inclined to replay conversations in your head looking for hidden meaning. Hidden meaning used to feel important. Now it feels unnecessary. That's because meaning has become clearer through consistency rather than explanation. Through repeated experiences that quietly reinforce the same truth. Consistency builds confidence. Confidence doesn't need reassurance. It allows you to stay present without anxiety creeping in. It allows you to enjoy connection without bracing for loss. It allows you to feel without immediately needing to define what you're feeling. Definition used to feel urgent. Now it feels optional. Not because clarity isn't valued, but because it's no longer the foundation. The foundation has shifted to something more stable, mutual respect for process. Process matters more than outcome. That understanding changes how you approach everything. You're no longer measuring progress by milestones or declarations. You're measuring it by how things feel over time. By whether there's ease instead of tension. By whether communication feels natural instead of strained. Strain has eased. Not completely disappeared, but softened to the point where it no longer dominates your experience. You may find that your emotional responses are calmer. You're less reactive, less defensive, less inclined to pull away when things feel uncertain. That doesn't mean uncertainty is gone. It means you're better equipped to handle it. Handling uncertainty is a skill. You've developed that skill here. It came from waiting when you wanted to rush. From pausing when you wanted to push. From sitting with discomfort instead of escaping it. That discomfort taught you something valuable. It taught you that not everything unresolved is unsafe. That ambiguity doesn't automatically mean instability. That clarity arrives more cleanly when it's allowed to mature. Maturity is evident now. It shows in how you carry yourself emotionally. In how you allow space without interpreting it as distance. In how you engage without needing guarantees. Guarantees used to feel necessary. Now they feel unrealistic. Real connections don't come with guarantees. They come with effort, presence, and honesty over time. Those elements are present here. Presence is especially noticeable. Presence isn't about constant communication or attention. It's about consistency of energy. About knowing that even when you're not in direct contact, the connection hasn't disappeared. That knowledge brings calm. Calm doesn't dull emotion. It stabilizes it. Stabilized emotion allows for deeper understanding. It allows you to see patterns clearly instead of reacting to isolated moments. Patterns tell the real story. And the pattern here is one of care that hasn't wavered, even when clarity was missing. Of attention that didn't fade when things felt complicated. Of restraint that wasn't indifference, but respect. Respect is a recurring theme now. Respect for timing. Respect for boundaries. Respect for emotional capacity. That respect has created safety. Safety allows honesty to exist without fear of rupture. You're no longer afraid that speaking your truth will dismantle what exists. You trust that honesty will be met with care, even if it brings change. Change isn't being feared anymore. It's being accepted as part of growth. Growth has been happening quietly all along. You can see it now in how differently you feel compared to before. In how much less effort it takes to stay centered. In how your emotional energy feels less scattered. Scattered energy creates confusion. Centered energy creates clarity. That clarity isn't loud or definitive. It's subtle and internal. It shows up as a sense of knowing that doesn't need constant validation. You might still have questions. But they no longer feel heavy. Heavy questions demand answers immediately. Light questions invite exploration. Exploration feels safer now. You're open to seeing where things lead without needing to control the direction. That openness isn't passive. It's intentional. Intentional openness is powerful. It allows the connection to reveal itself naturally instead of being forced into shape. Forcing never felt right here. That's why restraint played such a big role early on. It wasn't about avoidance. It was about protecting something that needed time to form. Now that formation feels complete enough to stand on its own. Standing doesn't mean rushing forward. It means being stable enough to move when movement feels right. Movement is happening now, but it's subtle. It's not about dramatic shifts. It's about internal alignment catching up with external reality. Alignment feels like relief. Relief from second-guessing yourself. Relief from questioning your intuition. Relief from wondering whether what you feel is valid. It is valid. And you know that now. That knowing changes how you relate to everything else. You're less likely to shrink your feelings. Less likely to dismiss them as inconvenient or premature. You trust yourself more. Self-trust is foundational. Without it, clarity feels dangerous. With it, clarity feels supportive. Support is what this phase offers. Not answers, but steadiness. Steadiness doesn't demand action. It allows action to arise naturally. That's important. Because when action comes from steadiness, it doesn't carry panic. It carries intention. Intention is guiding things now. You might notice more thoughtfulness in interactions. More care in timing. More awareness of how words land emotionally. That awareness wasn't always present. It developed through experience. Experience taught both of you what mattered most. What could be rushed and what couldn't. What needed protection and what needed expression. Expression is finding its place now. Not all at once. Gradually. Honestly. Honesty doesn't feel like exposure anymore. It feels like alignment. Alignment between what you feel and how you show up. Between what you value and what you tolerate. You're no longer tolerating confusion as a default state. That's a significant shift. Confusion once felt like the price of connection. Now it feels like a temporary phase that has run its course. Its purpose has been served. What replaces it is understanding. Understanding doesn't mean knowing everything. It means knowing enough to feel grounded. Grounded feelings don't swing wildly. They settle. You're settled now in a way that allows you to engage without fear. Fear isn't driving decisions anymore. It's informing them quietly, without control. That balance is healthy. Healthy connections don't eliminate fear. They integrate it. Integration is happening now. You're integrating everything you've learned from the uncertainty. The patience. The restraint. The self-awareness. Those lessons stay with you. They don't disappear with clarity. They strengthen it. This part of the story isn't about resolution. It's about readiness. Readiness to engage honestly. Readiness to communicate without self-protection. Readiness to allow things to be real, even if real is still evolving. Evolution doesn't need to be dramatic. It needs to be honest. Honesty is present now. You can feel it in the way this connection sits inside you. Calm. Open. Unforced. Not demanding. Not distant. Just present. Presence is enough. From here, whatever unfolds will be built on this foundation. A foundation that doesn't rely on guesswork or anxiety. A foundation built on trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in timing. Trust in the integrity of what's been forming. That trust didn't appear overnight. It was earned. And now that it's here, it changes everything quietly, without needing to announce itself. This phase doesn't ask you to do anything differently. It asks you to notice how different everything already feels. And to trust that feeling. Because it's guiding you in the right direction. It doesn't feel like anticipation anymore. It feels like understanding finally catching up to emotion. This part of the story carries a sense of quiet knowing, the kind that doesn't need reassurance or confirmation. You're no longer waiting for something to happen in order to feel settled. You're settled because something inside you has already shifted. What's different now is how you hold the connection. Earlier, it felt like something you had to protect carefully, almost like it might slip away if handled the wrong way. Every step felt cautious. Every feeling was examined before being acknowledged. That caution came from care, but it also came from uncertainty about whether what you felt had a safe place to land. Now, that uncertainty isn't driving you anymore. You're not gripping tightly, and you're not pulling away either. You're holding things gently, with confidence instead of fear. That balance didn't come easily. It came from learning what happens when you overthink, and what happens when you trust yourself instead. Trust feels calmer than hope. Hope looks ahead and asks for more. Trust stands where it is and says, "This is enough for now." That's the energy here. This phase feels like emotional maturity settling into your body. You're less reactive to small shifts. Less thrown off by silence or pauses. Less inclined to assume meaning where none has been shown. That doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you're no longer letting care turn into anxiety. Anxiety once filled the gaps. It explained things that didn't need explanation. It magnified moments that didn't need weight. It turned waiting into pressure. Pressure is gone now. In its place is patience that feels natural, not forced. You're not telling yourself to wait. You're simply not rushing. Rushing never felt aligned here. That's something you've come to accept fully. Whenever things were pushed too quickly, something felt off. Conversations felt strained. Emotions felt ahead of themselves. It created imbalance. Balance is present now. You're moving at a pace that feels emotionally honest. Not slow out of fear. Not fast out of desire. Just steady. Steadiness allows you to notice subtleties. Subtleties like how energy feels consistent rather than sporadic. How attention doesn't disappear when it's inconvenient. How care shows up quietly instead of loudly. Quiet care is powerful. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't announce itself. It exists because it's genuine. You've learned to recognize that now. Earlier, you might have overlooked it, waiting for bigger gestures or clearer statements. But time taught you that what lasts doesn't always arrive dramatically. It arrives repeatedly. Repetition builds trust. Trust changes how you interpret everything. Silence no longer feels like absence. It feels like space. Space that allows things to breathe instead of suffocating them with expectation. Expectation once created tension. It made you lean forward emotionally, always looking for the next sign, the next moment, the next confirmation. Now you're leaning back. Not disengaging. Relaxing. Relaxation doesn't weaken connection. It strengthens it by removing fear-based behaviors. Fear-based behaviors kept you alert but exhausted. You don't feel that exhaustion anymore. Your emotional energy feels more available. More grounded. Less scattered. That shift didn't come from answers. It came from self-awareness. Self-awareness taught you what you need to feel secure. Security isn't certainty. It's consistency plus honesty. Consistency has been there. Honesty is becoming easier now. Not because everything is being said, but because nothing is being denied. There's a difference. Denial requires effort. Honesty allows rest. Rest is important. Rest doesn't mean stagnation. It means you're no longer in survival mode emotionally. Survival mode once shaped how you interacted. You were careful, guarded, always preparing for potential disappointment. That preparation is unnecessary now. You trust your ability to handle whatever unfolds. That trust didn't exist before. It grew through experience. Through seeing that uncertainty didn't break you. That waiting didn't erase what mattered. That clarity didn't have to arrive dramatically to be real. Real clarity often arrives quietly. Quiet clarity is what you're experiencing now. You may not be able to articulate it perfectly, but you feel it. A sense of alignment between what you feel and how you're living. Between what you value and what you allow. You're no longer allowing confusion to be the center of the story. Confusion once felt like the defining feature. Now it feels like a chapter that has already ended, even if the book hasn't closed. Endings don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they fade. That's what happened here. The confusion faded as understanding grew. As patience matured into confidence. As self-trust replaced constant questioning. Questioning still exists, but it doesn't dominate. It feels lighter now. You're curious rather than anxious. Observant rather than reactive. Curiosity opens space. Space allows authenticity. Authenticity feels safer now. You're more comfortable showing up as you are, without filtering or minimizing. You don't feel the same need to protect yourself by staying emotionally neutral. Neutrality once felt safer than honesty. Now honesty feels safer than distance. Distance no longer serves a purpose here. That doesn't mean everything is close or intense. It means there's no intentional pulling away. No emotional withholding disguised as caution. Withholding was heavy. You've put it down. Putting it down doesn't mean giving everything away. It means trusting yourself to engage without losing balance. Balance is key. Balance allows you to stay present without attachment to outcome. Outcome fixation once drove a lot of emotional tension. You don't feel that tension now. You're not measuring moments. Not counting signs. Not wondering what everything means. Meaning reveals itself when you stop chasing it. That's happening now. This phase feels like integration. Integration of lessons learned during uncertainty. Integration of patience. Integration of emotional growth. Integration creates stability. Stability allows connection to deepen naturally. Depth doesn't come from intensity alone. It comes from shared understanding. Understanding is shared now, even if it hasn't been spoken explicitly. You can feel it in the ease. In the absence of panic. In the way things don't feel fragile anymore. Fragility used to be a concern. You were afraid of breaking something by saying too much or too little. That fear is gone. You know now that what exists here isn't so easily broken. It's been tested by time, silence, hesitation, and uncertainty. It held. That matters. Things that hold through uncertainty are strong. Strength doesn't shout. It endures. You're witnessing endurance now. Endurance allows you to relax into the present instead of bracing for the future. The future no longer feels threatening. It feels open. Open doesn't mean undefined. It means possible.